Okay, picture the scene. It's February 25th, 2000. We're in Detroit,
Right.
and the dot-com boom is at its absolute fever pitch. You know the vibe stock markets are completely detached from reality, and if you just put an E in front of your company name, your valuation doubles overnight.
It was a wild time. But right in the middle of all that noise, something truly bizarre happens.
Yeah.
An event that, at the time, really felt like the Berlin Wall coming down for the auto industry. You had the CEOs of General Motors, Ford, and Daimler Chrysler, all standing together on a stage.
And we really have to just pause on that for a second. I mean, how weird is that?
It's incredibly weird.
These are not friendly rivals. These are companies that, for what, the last 100 years?
They've been trying to absolutely destroy each other.
Exactly. You've got Rick Wagoner from GM, Jacques Nasser from Ford, Jürgen Schrempf from Daimler Chrysler, all on one stage. And they're not, like, announcing a merger, right? This isn't...
No, not a merger, a joint venture.
Mm-hmm.
They were linking arms to launch this massive, well, what they call the business-to-business marketplace.
Covisint.
Covisint. The whole idea was to combine all of their purchasing power
Into one
digital colossus.
And the money involved was just stupid. I was looking at the analyst predictions from that week. They were saying this new venture, this website, could be worth over $40 billion.
Which is astounding context.
Mm-hmm.
There was a genuine belief on Wall Street that this dot-com marketplace might end up being worth more than the car companies that actually built the cars.
It feels very familiar, doesn't it? It's the same energy we see today with things like the metaverse or some of those early blockchain pitches. The valuations are insane, the promises are sky high,
Right.
but nobody stops to ask if the humans involved actually want to use the thing. So what's our mission for this deep dive?
I think we need to unpack the rise and, well, the fall of Covisint. We're going to look at why these sworn enemies felt forced to team up the three pillars of tech they tried to build.
And ultimately why a $40 billion idea kind of crumbled into a cautionary tale.
Exactly. The difference between internet hype and cold, hard industrial reality.
Okay, so before we even get to the tech, we have to talk about the desperation. Why would Ford ever agree to share a platform with GM? Were they just terrified of being left behind by Silicon Valley?
That was definitely part of it, but the real driver was a crisis in the manufacturing sector itself. I mean, if you look at the late 90s, the auto industry was in a pressure cooker. Globalization was in full swing, but it resulted in massive overcapacity.
Define overcapacity for us in this context, because usually having the ability to make more stuff sounds like a good thing.
Not in auto manufacturing. It's a high fixed cost business. You build a factory, you have to pay for it, whether it's running or not. By 1998, the industry had excess capacity jump from about 12 million units to 24 million.
Wow.
And plant utilization dropped below 70%.
So they have empty factories just burning cash.
Exactly. When you aren't running factories full tilt, you bleed money. Margins were razor thin. They had already tried merging like the Daimler and Chrysler deal in '99, but they needed to cut costs desperately.
And naturally, because it's the year 2000, the internet is the magic wand. But didn't they try to do this individually first?
They did. Ford launched something called Auto Exchange, and GM launched Trade Exchange. They wanted to build their own walled gardens where their suppliers had to come to trade.
Which makes sense from a control perspective. I'm Ford, you sell to me on my terms.
It makes sense to Ford. It makes zero sense to the supplier. Imagine you were a company making, say, car seats. You sell to Ford, GM, and Chrysler. Suddenly Ford says, build a computer system that talks to Auto Exchange.
And GM says,
build a totally different one for Trade Exchange. The suppliers just revolted. They refused to bear the cost of integrating with three different proprietary systems.
So the automakers were basically forced into this marriage. They realized they couldn't win alone, so they pivoted to this idea of co-opetition.
Co-opetition, cooperative competition. The goal was to create an industry dial tone.
Dial tone. That's an interesting metaphor.
It implies utility-grade reliability. You know, like you pick up a phone and the service is just there. They wanted a standardized digital backbone for the entire global auto industry.
Let's break down the name Covisint because, honestly, it sounds like a medication for high blood pressure.
It really does, but it was actually a portmanteau. Covit for collaboration, Vises for visibility, and INT for integrated solutions.
That middle one, visibility, that seems to be the key point. I found this quote from a GM executive in the notes, that is. Well, it's pretty graphic. He said, when a customer orders a car with leather seats, the cow should wince.
the famous Covisint philosophy.
It's a bit disturbing, but you get it.
It perfectly describes the ultimate goal of supply chain transparency. Ideally, the moment you sign a contract at the dealership, a digital signal travels instantly backward through the chain, past the assembly plant, past the seat manufacturer, all the way to the leather tannery.
No inventory pileups, no lag, just perfect flow.
That was the dream.
And the projected savings were massive. Goldman Sachs estimated the system could save $1,064 per vehicle.
Right. And for an industry that fights over pennies on a door handle, $1,000 per car is just pure profit.
But here is where the math gets a little suspicious to me. I'm looking at the breakdown of those savings. The analysts claimed that suppliers would save more than the automakers. Something like $695 in savings for suppliers versus $368 for the car companies.
That was the pitch, yes.
But does that pass the smell test? I mean, why would the people at the bottom of the food chain capture the majority of the value?
Well, it depends on how you define savings. The consultants argued that suppliers were wasting millions on transaction friction. Faxes, phone tag, re-entering data, correcting errors. They calculated that digitizing this mess was worth that $695.
So the pitch is, you'll save money on paperwork.
Basically. But the suppliers looked at that math and said, great, I save $50 on administrative costs, but you're going to use this platform to hammer my prices down by $200.
They feared the efficiency was a weapon, not a gift.
Precisely. Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the platform. They had these 3 pillars of functionality.
Okay, let's walk through them. Pillar 1 was e-procurement.
This was the buying stuff pillar. Online catalogs and, most controversially, auctions. They had seller auctions to get rid of scrap metal and things like that. But the main event was the buyer auctions.
This is the reverse auction concept, right?
Correct. In a normal auction, prices go up. In a reverse auction, a buyer, Ford says, I need 100,000 steering wheels, and suppliers bid the price down to win the contract.
And this wasn't a quick process. There's a story about a tire option that just sounds like psychological warfare.
It really does. So Ford ran a reverse auction for tires. 5 major tire manufacturers logged in. They bid against each other for 12 hours.
12 hours?
12 hours of staring at a screen, just watching your profit margin evaporate in real time. Prices dropped significantly. And Ford looked at the data and said, this is amazing. We discovered the true market price.
But the tire guys must have been furious. You're taking a strategic partner and treating them like a commodity trader.
Exactly. Robin Meredith from Forbes wrote about this at the time. She said that suppliers viewed Covisint not as a marketplace, but as a transparent attempt to divert their profits to car makers.
When you force a partner to sweat for 12 hours to win a contract at razor-thin margins, you aren't building loyalty.
You're building resentment. A lot of it.
Okay, so Pillar 1 is basically a torture chamber for suppliers. What was Pillar 2?
Supply chain management. This is the moving stuff pillar.
Yeah.
The promise was real-time tracking of inventory and shipments.
This goes back to the Covisint idea, but we have to remember the context of the year 2000. We're talking about a world where broadband is rare, and most of these suppliers are running legacy systems on, mainframes.
That is the crucial bottleneck. It's easy to say real-time visibility in a PowerPoint deck. But in reality, you're trying to connect a Windows 98 PC in Detroit with a proprietary inventory system in Mexico and a raw material database in Germany.
And the data wasn't clean, right? I imagine a 10mm bolt is listed as Part A in Ford's system and Part B in GM's system.
Precisely. It was a data mapping nightmare. Before you can have visibility, you need a common language. Covisint spent a huge amount of time just trying to get these disparate systems to agree on what a steering wheel actually was in the database.
So Pillar 2 is bogged down in technical quicksand. What about Pillar 3?
Product development. The making stuff pillar. They call it the virtual project workspace.
Which sounds very futuristic.
Oh, it was incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
The goal was to let an engineer in Detroit and an engineer in Stuttgart look at the same 3D design files securely in real time to collaborate on a new part.
Again, technical reality check. We're talking about massive CAD files, 3D engine blocks, sending that over the internet in 2000.
It was practically science fiction. The bandwidth simply wasn't there to support that kind of heavy lifting. It was like trying to stream a 4K movie on a dial-up modem. Great concept. Impossible execution at the time.
So we have 3 pillars. One creates hatred among your partners, and the other 2 are technically borderline impossible. But surely with enough money, you can fix the tech. And they had money.
They had money, but they also had a dysfunctional family dynamic. And this is where the story gets really messy. To build this beast, they hired 2 tech giants, Oracle and Commerce One.
And why is that a problem?
Because at the time, Oracle and Commerce One were bitter, bitter rivals. The sources describe it as a poisonous rivalry. Commerce One was the hot B2B darling, the new kid on the block. Oracle's the database giant trying to pivot.
So you have GM and Ford who hate each other trying to manage a project built by Oracle and Commerce One who also hate each other.
It was a recipe for absolute disaster. You had incompatible corporate cultures, incompatible code bases, and while they were all fighting over the architecture, the company was burning cash at an astonishing rate.
How much?
Covisint was spending $12 million a month.
$12 million a month? Doing what?
Hiring consultants, marketing, and trying to patch together this Frankenstein software. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the government stepped in.
Right, because when the three biggest buyers in an industry get together to control purchasing.
The word cartel usually comes up.
Yeah.
The Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. and the Bundeskartellamt, the German antitrust authority, launched investigations immediately. They were terrified this was just a tool to illegally squeeze suppliers.
And what did that investigation do to the rollout?
It froze it. For the first few critical months, the partners weren't allowed to communicate freely. They had to operate in silos to avoid the appearance of collusion. So you have a startup that needs agility, completely paralyzed by legal fears, burning $12 million a month, while the tech vendors are screaming at each other.
It's a miracle they launched anything at all. But let's look at the scoreboard. Fast forward to September 2001. The dot-com bubble has burst. The hype is gone. How did Covisint actually perform?
The numbers were misleading. On the surface, they claimed victory. They had over 2,600 companies registered. They had run over 1,000 auctions with $45 billion in transaction value.
$45 billion sounds huge.
It sounds huge until you look at the denominator. That $45 billion represented less than 1% of a car maker's actual purchases for the year.
Less than 1%.
A drop in the bucket. They weren't the dial tone of the industry. They were a niche experiment. And the goal for year two was to hit 30%, or $75 billion.
Which critics at the time said was just impossible.
Completely impossible. The adoption just wasn't there. And the leadership structure was a joke. Initially, they tried to run it with 3 co-CEOs, one from each automaker.
Design by committee is bad enough, but leadership by committee is fatal.
They eventually brought in Kevin English as a single CEO in April 2001 to try and fix it. But he spent most of his time on diplomacy, just trying to finesse these giant egos. By then, the market had fragmented.
Because the suppliers didn't just sit there and take it, right? They built their own bunker.
Exactly. Major suppliers like Bosch and Continental looked at Covisint and said, "We don't trust this." So they founded their own exchange called supplion.com.
So instead of one unified standard, we're right back to fragmentation.
And the other automakers, VW, BMW, they refused to join Covisint because they didn't want to rely on a system built by their American rivals. Toyota just took a wait-and-see approach, so the monopoly never happened.
You know, reading through this, I get the sense that the technology was a secondary concern. There was a lot of criticism that this was really just a financial play.
That is a cynical but probably accurate take. Many analysts believe Covisint was created primarily to cash in on a dot-com IPO. They were eyeing a public offering for 2002.
Right. If you can spin this off and get a $40 billion valuation, GM and Ford can book a massive profit on their balance sheets, even if the software barely works.
Exactly. It was financial engineering masquerading as software engineering. But the IPO depended on reaching a break-even point. And as the burn rate continued and the volume stayed so low, that IPO dream just evaporated.
So bringing this all back, we started with a historic handshake and ended with a platform handling 1% of the volume. What really went wrong?
Kevin English, the CEO who tried to save it, he summed it up pretty well. He said Covisint represented revolutionary change, but the auto industry moves at an evolutionary pace.
That feels like a very polite way of saying we tried to do too much, too fast.
It is, but I think the deeper failure was human, not technical. Technology cannot fix a lack of trust.
That's the key right there.
You can build the most transparent, real-time system in the world, but if the person on the other end thinks you're trying to rob them, they will find a way to break that system. They won't upload their real data. They won't bid in the auction.
Or they'll bid, but then they'll cut corners on quality to make up the margin they lost during that 12-hour auction.
Precisely. The cow wins philosophy failed because the cow, the supplier, refused to stand still.
It's such a powerful lesson for anyone looking at AI or automated markets today. We tend to think efficiency is just a math problem. If we connect the data, the optimization happens automatically.
But business is relational, especially in manufacturing. You need partners who want you to succeed, not hostages who are just looking for the exit.
The source material ends with a bit of uncertainty, saying the jury is still out. But looking back from today, we know the verdict. E-procurement did become standard. We all use digital tools now. But the dream of the single, centralized industry monopoly that died.
It did. And frankly, if the big three, with their billions of dollars in total market dominance, couldn't force this centralization, it suggests that these massive industry-wide monopolies might just be impossible to execute.
That's the takeaway for me. Centralization looks great in a spreadsheet, but it fails in the real world because of friction and fear.
And maybe that's a good thing.
I want to leave our listener with a thought to mull over. We are seeing a lot of new tech that promises to unify industries, whether it's decentralized finance or AI supply chains. The pitch is always the same. Join our platform and we'll make everything efficient. But looking at Covisint, we have to ask, does technology actually bring competitors together? Or does it just create a new high-speed battlefield for them to fight over margins?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.